twice a year you carry the blade to the bench, clamp it in a vise, and drag a file or a grinder across it until the edge catches the light. And twice a year, within about 3 weeks, the tips of your grass turn a pale, ragged brown again. So you assume the edge went dull, and you do the whole thing over. And that ritual, the sharpening itself, is a large part of why your lawn keeps tearing instead of cutting. You have been told a sharp blade cuts clean, and it sounds obvious, and it is wrong in a way nobody around you has ever thought to check. Before this is over, I am going to tell you the one number already stamped into your own blade that you have never once read. I am going to tell you why the sharpest edge you can make is the fastest one to fail. And near the end, I am going to give you a 10-second check with a coin that decides whether your blade cuts or destroys, and it costs you nothing. Go out to the garage in a minute and put your thumb, carefully, flat against the flat of that blade, not the edge. Feel how thin you have ground it. Hold that thought, because that thinness is not the solution you think it is. Here is the scale of what has gone into this. If you have owned that mower for 6 or 7 seasons, you have pulled the blade, balanced it or not, ground it, and bolted it back on somewhere between 12 and 30 times. Call it a full afternoon a year, once you count the removing, the grinding, the rehanging, the swearing at the bolt. That is whole Saturdays, over the years a week of your life, spent making an edge that was never the thing standing between you and a clean lawn. And every grind took a little more steel off, which matters later, so hold that too. It looks like it works, and I want to be fair about why, because you are not imagining the improvement. The first mow after a fresh sharpening does look better. The grass stands up straighter, the clippings are finer, the whole yard reads a shade greener for a few days. That is real. What is also real is that it lasts about 2 mows. In a Japanese workshop, a craftsman testing an edge does not ask whether it is sharp today, he asks how it holds, so that the tool still works on the 100th cut. In your garage, you sharpen for the first cut, which means you are optimizing for the one moment the blade is least like how it will spend the rest of the season. The shine you made on Saturday is gone by the second pass across the yard, and you never see it go, so you blame dullness and reach for the file again. Now the real mechanism, and this is the part that will change how you look at the thing on the bench. A lawnmower blade does not slice grass. It never has. At the engine speeds you are running, the tip of that blade is traveling somewhere close to 200 miles an hour, and at that speed, grass is not sliced, it is struck. The blade cuts the way a baseball bat cuts, by impact, by hitting the blade of grass faster than the grass can bend out of the way. Which means the edge does not need to be razor keen. It needs to be present, even, and durable. A razor edge on a mower blade is like a razor edge on an axe, and nobody who swings an axe for a living puts a razor on it, because a razor is a thin wedge of steel with almost nothing behind it, and the first rock, the first buried root, the first dog toy folds that thin edge over on itself. Once it folds, it stops striking and starts dragging, and a dragging blade does not cut grass. It rips it, and the torn end cannot close over, so it dries out and pales to that ragged brown you keep seeing. That is the reason the yard looks torn 3 weeks after you sharpened it. You did not lose the edge. You made an edge that was built to fail, and then it failed, on schedule, exactly as thin steel does. And here is the line I need you to sit with, because it is the whole video in one sentence. Grinding it sharper and thinner every season does not fix the tearing, it causes the tearing, because every pass of that file makes the edge that folds faster. Doing the habit harder makes the problem worse. You cannot sharpen your way out of a problem that sharpening created. And that is really the pattern behind every one of these. They are not working harder at this than you are. They are removing the cause instead of covering it up. And there are hundreds more habits like these that Japanese families have used for generations. I have pulled all of them together into a book of practical Japanese methods for the lawn, the garden, the kitchen, and the home. If you're watching it from TV, take out your phone and scan the code above, or just check the link in the description. So here is what you do instead, and it is cheaper and slower and far less satisfying than the grind you are used to, and every one of those is a feature, not a compromise. The first part is geometry, and the second part is balance, and either one alone is half a job. Start with the angle. Somewhere on that blade, cast into the steel or printed near the mounting hole, there is often an angle the manufacturer intended, and it is almost never the angle you have been grinding. The correct working bevel for impact cutting sits around 30 degrees, blunt enough that you would call it dull if you ran your thumb across it, closer to a butter knife than a kitchen knife. In Japanese blade making, there is a shape called hamaguriba, which translates literally as clamshell edge, a bevel that swells outward in a gentle convex curve instead of running flat to a thin point, so that there is always a body of steel standing behind the cutting line to hold it up. You are going to borrow that idea. Instead of grinding a flat, thin wedge, you keep the bevel short and put a whisper of a rounded shoulder behind it, so the edge has something to lean on when it hits a stone. It will not gleam. It is not supposed to gleam. Do this. Take the blade off, and instead of chasing it to a razor, run a coarse file at that 30-degree angle in one direction only, following the existing bevel, maybe 10 passes aside, just knocking back the dents and folds until the edge is clean and even along its whole length. Stop the moment it is even. You are not making it sharp, you are making it honest. That is a 10-minute job with an $8 file, and you will do it once a season, not 4 times. Then the second half, the part almost nobody does, and the part that is doing more damage than any dull edge ever could. Balance. When you grind more off one end of the blade than the other, and you always do, because nobody grinds perfectly evenly, that blade is now heavier on one side, and when it spins at 200 miles an hour, a heavy side becomes a wobble, and that wobble does 2 things. It cuts the grass at a different height on every rotation, which is the faint washboard striping you have seen in certain light, and blamed on the mower being old. And it hammers, every second, on the little bearing the blade spins on, wearing out a part that costs far more than the blade. In a Japanese home, a tool is kept true because a true tool lasts a generation. In your shed, a tool is kept sharp and left crooked, which means you have been sharpening the one thing that barely mattered while ignoring the one thing quietly destroying the machine. So after you file it, hang the blade on a nail through the center hole or set it on a $6 cone balancer and watch which end dips. Whichever end drops is heavier, so file a little more off the flat of that end, not the edge, until the blade hangs dead level. That is another 5 minutes. Now you have an edge that survives and a blade that runs true, and you did both for the price of 1 file and 1 cone. Here is what right looks like, so you know it when you see it, and do not talk yourself back into the grinder. The first mow after this, the sound changes before anything else does. A folded, dragging blade makes a soft, tearing hiss under the deck. A true, blunt, balanced blade makes a cleaner, lower chop, a sound you feel more than hear. Look at a clipping the next morning, hold one up to the window. A torn tip is frayed and already going white at the very end. A struck tip is squared off, still green right to the edge, the whole yard the same color top to bottom, 2 days later, instead of that dusty pale cast that used to creep in by the weekend. By the end of week 1, the striping is gone. By week 2, the browning at the tips has stopped returning, because nothing is tearing anymore. By week 4, the grass is thicker, because a clean cut closes fast and loses less water, and invites less disease. And a lawn that is not spending its energy healing torn ends spends it growing instead. Give it a full season, and the change you notice most is the one that is hardest to point at, which is that you stopped noticing the lawn at all because it stopped going wrong. 3 things will go wrong, and each one is telling you something specific, so listen to it instead of reaching for the file. If the tips still fray after you have done the geometry and the balance, the blade is not the problem, the height is, and you are cutting too much at once. There is a rule the impact edge depends on, which is that you never remove more than 1/3 of the grass blade in one pass, so raise the deck a notch and cut more often, because a blade set too low is scalping, and no edge, sharp or blunt, cuts a plant it is tearing out by the crown. If instead you get a fresh wobble a few weeks in, you rebalanced fine, but you hit something and folded one end. So recheck the balance, not the sharpness, because the wobble is the wear talking. And if the cut is clean, but the grass browns anyway in patches, you have been mowing wet, and wet grass folds under the blade and slips the strike no matter how true the steel, so mow when the lawn is dry to the touch, mid-morning after the dew has burned off and the browning stops. A few homes need a small adjustment. If your yard is full of sand, and you know if it is, your edge will go blunt faster from the grit, so check it twice a season instead of once. But check, do not automatically grind. If you are cutting tough, wiry, warm-season grass, rather than the soft, cool-season kind, keep the bevel at the blunter end of the range, nearer 40 degrees, because thicker steel behind the edge survives the harder stalk. And if you own 2 blades, and I would, keep the second one filed and balanced on the shelf, so a swap is 4 minutes and the mower never sits, and the tired one waits for a rainy day. The long payoff is not a dramatic one, and that is the point. There is no gleaming edge to admire, no before and after that photographs well. There is just the slow disappearance of a chore. The pale, ragged strip along the fence stops coming back. The Saturday afternoon on the bench does not get scheduled. The mower that used to feel like it was dying at year 7 runs the same at year 12 because the bearing it spins on was never being hammered. In a Japanese house, a thing is maintained so that it asks nothing of you, so that its correctness is invisible. That is what you are buying here. An absence, the quiet of a problem that simply stops occurring. And the money makes the old habit look strange in hindsight. The grinding path costs you a wheel or a file, sure, call it $10, but it also costs you a fresh blade far sooner because you grind the steel away, $20 a season, in blades you did not need to replace, and eventually a spindle bearing from the wobble, which is the better part of $100 and an ugly afternoon. The replacement path is one $8 file and one $6 balancing cone, $14 once, and they last for years. You are trading a recurring cost that quietly compounds for a fixed cost that never comes back. Now, before you go do any of it, the coin. I promised you a 10-second check, and here it is, and it works one level above everything else I have told you, because it is not a step, it is the test the whole method serves. Balance the filed blade on a nail, and lay a coin flat on the higher end. If a coin's weight, and it is almost nothing, is enough to tip it level, your balance is close enough that the wobble is gone. If it takes far more than that, you are not done. That coin is doing the job your 200-mile-an-hour spin was doing badly, telling you the truth about your steel in silence, and once you have felt it, you will never trust a shine again. So ask yourself 3 things, and they will carry to every blade you ever touch. Is the edge even along its whole length, yes or no? Does it hang dead level on a nail, yes or no? And are you removing more than 1/3 of the grass in a single pass, yes or no? Even, level, and 1/3. Get those 3, and the sharpness you have been chasing turns out to have been beside the point the entire time. And none of this was your fault. You were told sharp cuts clean by people who were told the same, and it is true of a knife, and a mower blade is not a knife, and nobody ever went back to check whether the advice survived the 200 miles an hour. The habit made sense the first time somebody did it. It is honest work, it feels like care, and it is care, only aimed at the wrong part of the tool. You were maintaining the edge, because the edge is the part that looks like it matters, and the balance and the height, the parts that actually matter, are the parts nobody photographs and nobody taught you to see. That is not a flaw in you, that is a flaw in what got handed down. So tonight, do the smallest thing, and only this. Do not even take the blade off. Walk out, look under the deck, with the spark plug wire pulled off for safety, and just run a finger along the edge, feeling for the folds and dents. That is it. You are not fixing anything tonight, you are only learning to feel the difference between an edge that is dull and an edge that is bent, because once your finger knows that, everything else follows on its own. Thanks for staying with me all the way through this one. Tell me down in the comments what you find when you feel along that edge, folded, dented, or worn flat, because it tells me a lot about your yard. Subscribe if you want the rest of the yard taken apart the same way. And the card coming up on screen is on the one mowing habit that browns more lawns than a dull blade ever will, and it is the height, so watch that one next.